When you're dealing with people with developmental disabilities, you can't always just put everything in the box and this is what we're going to do.
She had no communication skills whatsoever. We used to say when we first started working with her, we would tell people this is probably what it was like to work with Helen Keller.
I'm Sherri Henderson and with Lee Henderson, and we're here to talk about Henderson Haven and why we started it and this journey. When we moved to Florida in 1995, Trey was in his second year of kindergarten, and we faced a whole lot of challenges because of his diagnosis of Down syndrome. People just automatically putting him in a box in the back of the school in a self-contained classroom, not even looking at what he was capable of doing. They just saw a disability and that label. And we believed that Trey was way more than that. He had never been put in that kind of a box before. And we believed with the right supports, he could achieve anything. So we became the troublemaking parents in our school district, fighting for his rights to have access to as many general ed things as possible, and just giving him the supports he needed academically and therapy-wise that he needed as well. So along that path, when we were traveling down that path, we had other families reaching out to us. So how are you getting that? So advocacy became part of kind of my everyday thing. When parents ask questions, I'd answer them, because Lee and I both had a background in the field when we were in Texas. So we kind of came prepared with Trey and what he was entitled to. So we kind of helped pass that knowledge on to other families. And then it just became a family reached out to me because their adult daughter had been left stranded by transportation in Northwest Jacksonville, and they knew I had a son with disabilities. They didn't know that we had been in the business before, but I helped their daughter, Kelly, and she started coming, and we opened up her being able to communicate when she was in her 30s and no one had even tried. And as I started working with Kelly, then other families started asking, and yeah, that's how Henderson Haven started, just because other people saw what we were doing, wanted to have access to it, and saw that we were a family with someone with a disability and could understand other families and what they were going through. Children have access to education services at age 3. There are birth through 3 services. A lot of times in therapies, you can get them as soon as a disability is recognized. They can start PT, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. There are some services, and states vary whether they come to the home or you go to a center. But at age 3, they're eligible for public school programming, and they're entitled to therapies as well as transportation to and from school. All of the things that come with school, they're eligible at age 3. And we believe the earlier a child starts getting any kind of therapies, the interventions, the earlier they start, the better outcome long term for those kids as they go into adulthood.
There really wasn't, starting the business itself wasn't too much of a challenge. I mean, you had to go through the thing that anybody does starting a business. You can get an attorney and be incorporated, and then do all the IRS regulations for to become a 501c3 nonprofit, all that kind of stuff. So I mean, there was some paperwork and that kind of thing, but it wasn't. Probably the most difficult thing was personally the timing that that we had to adjust. I was a regional for a hotel chain, and we kind of had about a 3-year plan if to kind of wait and see how it was going to do while she was working on it. Had a couple of employees, and it grew quickly enough that we had to decide if we were going to act on that. So that really probably was the biggest challenge, was our personal, like I had to resign, and we had to have a plan on how we were going to make that transition. We were taking a fairly substantial cut in pay and household income, so we had to make sure that we had the things in place that wasn't going to be an issue down the road. Was there anything we needed to take care of now before we made this move, that kind of thing. It moved a lot faster than we thought it would. which I guess is a good thing. But as far as starting the business, wasn't that difficult. It's been much more difficult in dealing with regulations and things of that nature over the years. And then, of course, we dealt with COVID like everybody did. That got pretty challenging. But no, I don't think there was really any pushback. We certainly got labeled fairly quickly as I don't know, maybe the troublemakers, the people that were looking at things a little differently. But I don't know that if somebody just flat out disagreed with us and thought we were wrong, maybe she did. I never heard it from anybody. But I do know that there was some time, like going into the IEPs, for example. One of our advocacy thing is that Sherri would actually accompany a family into an IEP, and that got a little pushback at first because the schools weren't sure what we were trying to do and what we were there for, and I think it kind of made them nervous to have an agency come in and represent the families on the other side. But it didn't take long for the schools to see that we weren't there to help mom and dad get something that was unreasonable. We were there to help get what was best for the child, not. And sometimes that wasn't anything the school disagreed with. So it ended up being we were able to work fairly close. In fact, it ended up being where sometimes the schools would recommend us to families to help them prepare for IEPs. So at first it was a little bit of a pushback, but once they realized that we weren't in there to be, to just cause problems and whatever this family wants, that's what they need to get. Because Sherri, she didn't have any problem telling mom and dad, you need to pull it back a little bit. Remember, we're not here just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. Maybe is the best way to put it down. Sometimes that's not always the best thing. We're here to do what's best for the child.
And Clay County schools now keep a parent advocate on staff now in our county. So now parents have a free advocate that is paid for by the school district, but they don't work for the school. I mean, they work for the school district, but they're there to help parents navigate that whole system. And that's been the one that they had that I had the biggest relationship with in helping families retired, and now they have another one. But that is a change that I've seen in our county, that now the school will make sure that parents have access to an advocate. The IEP is an Individualized Education Plan. It's kind of the roadmap for the school and all the therapists in the school to know what supports this child needs. It identifies their needs and what the school has got to provide, accommodations that need to be made, long-term goals. It's supposed to include transition that's starting at age 14. What's the transition going to look like when they finish school? What's their diploma track? It's where then that document kind of has all of the components needed to figure out a matrix score. And a matrix score is what determines how much funding is attached to that child in that school. So then they kind of know how they're going to pay for it, but what is needed. They have to track goals. All the therapists involved have goals. A teacher has goals, all of that kind of thing. So. I have a T-shirt that Lee designed one time that says, "Just because it's the way you've done it doesn't mean it's the way it should be." People get real complacent when you're chugging along and doing stuff, and when therapies change, when research changes about what works and what doesn't work, and sometimes it can be real difficult to get people to move, and it's easier to have a one-size-fits-all approach in a school. Everybody is working on this book. We're going to do this book report. We're going to do this math lesson, and everything is just kind of laid out. And when you're dealing with people with developmental disabilities and people who have different ways of processing information, you can't always just put everything in the box and this is what we're going to do. You've got to think outside the box. You've got to present it in different ways. And I challenge people to that. I challenge schools to look at simple solutions that can make accommodations, such as letting a kid stand up at the back of the classroom while there's a lecture instead of making them sit still in a desk. giving them something to keep their hands busy, making sure they do reading in the morning and math before lunch because that's the best time that they learn. Thinking outside the box, but then pushing parents too. What are you going to do if you die? What's your plan? What's your backup plan? What's your backup plan to your backup plan? And I push parents to think about the hard things. I keep Kleenexes handy anytime I'm talking to a parent because I don't mean to make them cry, but inevitably a lot of times they cry because I make them look at the hard stuff and then what's the plan going to be? How are we going to accomplish this? How are we going to get your kid from an 8-year-old to an 18-year-old to a 28-year-old? What is their life going to be like? What are the supports are they going to need? And what if you're not here to do it? So I'm not afraid to say the hard things. I'm not afraid to try different things. I'm not afraid to get down on the ground and play with a kid and figure out a kid and challenge other people to do the same thing. Get to where they are, experience life the way they experience it just for a short time. You'd be really surprised at how their perceptions of what they're doing change.
I think another thing too is
fun.
We don't put expectations on the people that we serve. And that's something that I think a lot of programs and providers I don't know if they mean to, but you do it for so long that you just kind of start deciding, well, this is all this person's ever going to do. And we don't do that. We bring people in and we say that we believe that they're going to be successful in whatever we ask of them. I guess our expectations are that they're going to be successful. We'll have other people say, well, we don't do that. Well, I've actually had professionals say in meetings, you expect too much out of this person. No, and that's why you're not getting what we're getting out of this person because you don't expect it. And I do think that sets us apart from a lot of other programs out there. We're not here to babysit. We're not here to keep people happy, to give them treats so they behave. We're going to push them. We want them to be successful and to make it as far as they can. And you can't have preconceived expectations and make that happen.
I'll give an example of Trey. Trey needed to know how to tie his shoes. He was a little boy. There weren't a lot of Velcro shoes back then. And definitely no slip-ons. And so he needed to learn how to tie his shoes. And we tied his shoes. And wherever he went, he had people who tied his shoes. But we knew that he was capable of doing it. We just had to figure out how he was going to get it done. And so he went off to his first Boy Scout camp. He was heading to Virginia to his first Boy Scout camp. And I told him, listen, you've got tennis shoes. You've got to be able to tie your shoes, man. I don't care how you make it happen. You got to get it done. And he was like, but they'll help me. And I said, yes, your buddies would help you. They would tie your shoes. Your leaders will tie your shoes. But you're going to a camp where you are probably the only person who has a visible disability. And other people don't understand that if they haven't been around it. And chances are your friends are going to get made fun of, or you're going to get made fun of, and your friends are going to back you up and want to fight, and then you're all going to get kicked out and all have to come home. So figure out how to tie your shoes. And so he had been learning how to tie knots in Scouts. And so he just did a series of knots, and he did not trip on his shoes, and he did it for the first time the morning he left for camp. We knew he could do it. He had to figure out a way. Was it the way that everybody else tied their shoes? No. When you presume competence, you know that they've got the ability, they've got the knowledge to do it. The execution may need different strategies applied. And that's kind of where we'll figure it out. If one A, B, and C don't work, we'll keep going until we have to do double letters. We're stubborn and we see the potential. And so we'll work through it. As long as they're willing to try and we can keep them motivated to keep trying, we presume competence. They're in there. It's our job to help unlock their potential.
Well, I give her another example. We work with a young lady who's autistic and blind, and no agency would work with her, including the Florida School for the Blind. Nobody. She had no communication skills whatsoever. We used to say when we first started working with her, we would tell people this is probably what it was like to work with Helen Keller, because she would lash out, she would scream, she would claw, she would grab hold of your clothes. I had staff that had to bring extra shirts because they knew that the shirt they were wearing was probably going to get ripped. But we didn't give up, and we knew that she was in there somewhere. We needed to help her find a way to communicate and we never gave up. And we worked with her on walking with a cane. We worked with her on some very basic Braille, um, large, oversized, just for basic things, potty, hungry, and had those made into a board where she could feel it with her whole palm. Just being, are you, do you want to go outside? Nodding yes. Just that alone, her mother was in tears because she had never communicated that before. So, and nobody else would even try to do that. Everybody else, it was just, well, this, they felt bad for her, but it was a girl with autism who's blind who was never going to be able to accomplish anything. And you can't go into it with that. You've got to try and figure it out.
Yeah, the Division of Blind Services wouldn't even authorize a cane. We bought her a cane. Actually, we've now bought her two because she wore one out. But yes, her
Because they thought it
autism
was a waste of money.
it was a waste of money. Her autism was too severe.
And
Before she came to us, she sat in a beanbag on the floor in the corner, and people would give her snacks just to keep her happy. Just let her sit there on the floor in a beanbag chair. And we're like, come to the table, eat your food up here. Please don't throw your food. If you throw your food, you're gonna have to pick it up. And she's doing really, really.
now, does she never have behaviors? Of course not. Of course she has issues. And part of the reason for that is because she's smart enough to know that that's how she's going to get what she wants. She knows who's going to give in to her and who's not going to give in to her. I mean, who among us wouldn't love to sit in a beanbag chair and eat snacks all day if we can get away with it? So, you just have to. What I think one of the things that we found is the most important thing is to find a voice. You've got to find a way for them to have a way to communicate, and that in itself will reduce behaviors tremendously. Because most behaviors are a form of communication. They're frustrated. They're upset about something. We're not understanding. We're not doing the right thing, and that's what most behaviors are. So when you figure out a way to give them a voice, it's amazing how quickly those behaviors just take a nosedive.
One of the first things we do when someone applies for services is they do the application, and one of the pages at the back, I tell parents, this is coming. There's no such thing as too much information. What are their likes, dislikes, strengths, struggles? What are triggers? What calming strategies have you used? So we try to get as much information from the parents because the parents know their kids. They live with them day in, day out. They know their kids better than anybody. What has worked for you? What hasn't? That gives us a good starting place. But then when they come into a group, things may change a little bit, and it is just a process of elimination. Let's try this to start and using some of the things that we know that they like. And sometimes it's going cold turkey from the tablet that they're used to walking around with all the time. We're going to leave it up here. We're going to get it charged for you. It'll be ready when you're ready to go home. And we let them know it's right here. You see, it's right here. All right, you're going to be all right. Let's go do something else. So it is just experience and the years of working with people helps a lot. We can kind of identify things a little quickly. It's taking that information from the parents and then just being wide open and willing to try whatever it takes to help them succeed. And sometimes that process goes quickly, and sometimes it does take a while. And then it's just a breakthrough. Once it happens, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It's why we keep coming back every day. When those moments, we live for those moments whenever we really see the difference. And when it happens here, and then again, when a parent says they're seeing it at home, then we really know we've done our job.
Sometimes it's difficult to get the parent not to lie. When you're asking for information, you have to remember that this family has probably been through heck before they've even gotten to us. And they don't want to talk about all the behaviors that their child has because they've been kicked out of every school and every daycare and every other program, and they get phone calls at work, and they don't want to tell us all these things. And we have to convince them it's okay. You're not going to get those phone calls, I promise. You're not, and it's amazing when they realize that, how much more starts coming out, and then you can really start making progress.
And we try to make a point too, because a parent has to be on the team. If they're not on our team, we've had to ask parents to leave in the past. You know what? If we're not going to keep fighting you, if you don't believe this is worth it, and you're not going to do your part, then we need you to go. here are some options you might look into. But if we're not helping because you're not doing your part, move on. But when we have those parents and we've had that really strong discussion with them, and I'm really frank with people up front, but we will make a point to call those parents, especially in the first week or two, and give them good news. So because they're not used to getting those phone calls, they're like, hello. I said, first of all, your child is okay. They're not in trouble. I just want you to know this just happened, and give them some good news. And they just, that is really hard for them to believe sometimes, that we will make sure we make that effort to give them the positive. Doesn't mean their kids aren't going to have those bad days. They typically tend to taper off. And when they do happen, they tend to be shorter in duration too. So it's kind of fun.
I think I wish I'd have known. And we were just talking about how parents lie, or the ones that don't believe. One of the things that I think they all have in common is they've been told by the so-called experts since their child was born what they were never going to do. I remember the talk the doctor had with Trey, and when he was born, about, he's never going to balance a checkbook. He's never going to be able to live on his own. He's never, and it was, he was also talking, he would also about the positive things too, but it was very limiting. Don't have a lot of expectations for this child. I have a picture of me holding him as a baby in my office, and underneath it says, "Don't let them steal your dreams," because that's what they do. You have dreams for your child. When your wife's pregnant, you're already starting to dream about what this child's going to do and what they're going to be. And don't let, just because they have a developmental disability or something, some other issue, don't let them take that away from you. Continue to have those dreams, because you don't know what they're going to accomplish. And again, it goes back to putting your expectations on them. You don't do that. You have the expectations that you had for any other child. When we raised Trey, we didn't raise him any different than we did any of our other two kids. He had the same rules, the same chores, the same expectations as anybody else. And I don't think he would have done as well as he did if we hadn't had that.
I think new parents need to try really hard. They often feel real isolated and alone, and finding quickly, as quickly as it can, a support system of other parents. Social media has opened that up for a lot of parents that wasn't around when Trey was little. It was, you just had to know somebody who had a kid, or you meet families once your kid starts school. So those babies, infants, and toddlers, and families that are having that they need to find that support system as quickly as possible, even if it is just by texting or social media, but getting out of the house and getting with them, and then getting access to as many therapies as quickly as possible. That will open up the speech, the communication, their access to their community, and how they interact with their community, like with occupational therapy. Those kinds of things are so vital to being able to make sure that we get them a voice as quickly as possible. And then having their backup plans. I think if we had more organizations, starting with the doctors, start with therapists, the school system, so many times they hold on to just what they know, and they're not willing to share other information. And it's really difficult. And a lot of people say, well, they just need to look. Well, you can go down a rabbit hole when you start researching things online. You're not always sure it's really true. And so having resources available for parents, some people say, well, just look. Well, if you've got a child with a disability who also may have behavior challenges or high medical needs, that parent is surviving. They are going diaper change to cleaning poop off the wall, to spilled milk and bookshelves turned over, screaming at siblings, whatever it may be. They are surviving. So they need to have people in the community that are willing to walk alongside them. And I think that's what we do at Henderson Haven. We're willing to walk alongside someone through the good, the bad, the ugly. We will help them. We will let them cry on our shoulder. We will celebrate the wins. Families need to find someone who can do that with them and help guide them and help them get access to what their kid needs and what the parent needs. Because if they're not okay, then they're not going to be able to do a great job with their kid.
I think also don't be afraid to question the experts. Don't be afraid to push back, because they get set in their ways, just like we all do, and they're not used to somebody pushing back and questioning. Sometimes look at, if you're not getting and I don't want to say if you're not getting the answer you want, because I'm not saying that they don't know what they're talking about, but if you feel like they're not willing to listen to you, then you need to find somebody else. But if you've got one that is willing to listen to you, sometimes you'll open their eyes to something. I can give you an example. We had a young man that we worked with whose his psychologist, his meds were off, and we knew they were off. And the dad kept calling, and they wouldn't, they just, no, he's fine. And finally, Sherri went to the emergency room and insisted on seeing this doctor, and said, "I'm not leaving until I do," which was a very interesting. And he actually came out, and he took Sherri in, and he took the child in and the dad in, and he listened to her, and he said, "You know what? You're right." He saw what it was that she was talking about. He could see the what the child was doing, the facial tics and things. It's actually what was happening. And he said, "You know what? You're right." And after that, we discovered that he was sending families to us for services. So don't be afraid to push back, because once you get through that wall of them not wanting to listen, sometimes they go, "Oh, well, okay," and they learn something new. We're always, all of us, I don't care how much we know, we're always learning something new.
Yes.
So that would be something I would tell them. The ABA. The difference, I believe, we teach, they train. In a nutshell, that really is the difference. And it comes back to that presuming competence. We believe that a child can understand why a behavior is inappropriate. They don't think that's true. They think the behavior has to be trained out of the child. And the problem is that's not real life. You don't get rewarded every 30 minutes because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not going to get that in school. You're not going to get that in work. You're not going to get that in real life. So there are instances, and I'm not saying that it doesn't work ever. It can work. I do question whether it follows through when the environment changes and the rewards are taken away. But there are some places it's appropriate. If you have someone that you've tried everything that you can, and they're just obviously not going to be able to function in the community, and you end up making the decision that they're going to be better off in some type of behavioral group environment, like a behavioral group home or something like that, then ABA is absolutely appropriate there, because everybody's getting it, everybody's on the same program, and they're not going to be changing the environment, so it'll work well. But when you've got a child that they're going to be expected, like when kids come to us to our camp and they've been in an ABA program, that can be a challenge for a while, because they're not going to get those rewards. Somebody who, for example, they get to have their tablet every 30 minutes if they sit in their desk. I'm just going to use an example. We don't allow tablets in our program areas, so they're not going to get it. And the funny thing is that it doesn't take long for the parents to realize, you know what, they're able to function without that. I don't have to do that all the time. You got to be willing to not give in. You got to be willing to stand your ground. But yeah, in a nutshell, one sentence: we teach, they train.
And they've got to follow these guidelines because insurance is covering it. So they've got to tick all these boxes. And so parents see it as a way to get some help that insurance will cover. And they had a lot of people pushing for insurance to cover it. And if you don't have autism, you have to jump through a whole lot more hoops in order to get that behavioral service. So it's not really accessible to all. We don't care what the label is of a child. If they need us, they need us. We're here. So that also sets us apart from ABA. We don't have to get pre-approval. We don't have to have a whole lot of documentation. We need a parent willing to pay, willing to work with us, and a child who needs our help. So.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's why families use ABA, because it's childcare that they don't have to pay for. And that is sad. I mean, the ABA people have done a really good job of positioning themselves as being the accepted. Um, and again, not saying that there aren't times it's absolutely appropriate and there are times it work, but it's not the end. It's kind of like group homes. People think we're anti-group homes. No, we're not. Group homes are a perfect place for some people. We're against that being the first thing you jump to. My child has developmental disability. They're going in a group home. That's our, let them try. Did you try to live on your own? Did you try to have your own place? Did you try any other things before you jump there? That's our thing. ABA may be the thing for you, but did you try anything else first? Because it's not going to be the answer for someone who wants to live and have a job like you and I have, or go to school. Those things are not going to go through. It's kind of the everybody gets a ribbon kind of thing. You hear people argue that everybody gets a trophy. That's not real life. It's kind of the same kind of thing. You don't get rewarded just for doing what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And everybody uses ABA to some degree, really, if you think about it. If you're a mom and dad and your child gets punished because they wrote on the wall and then they bring home straight A's and they get rewarded for something, well, that's ABA. It truly is. And it's just, so it's something that we all use in our lives, but it's behavioralism. And if I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of, but look it up. Look up the history of behavioralism. In the 80s, it was debunked as a way for human beings to learn what we need to learn. So anyway, that's you'll get me on a soapbox.
And ABA also is something that we wouldn't want if you're quote unquote normal. You wouldn't necessarily hire someone to come in your house and show you all your bad habits, all the times you say something mean or you get angry, and oh, we got to have a program. We got to have a program. So it's not really fair because someone has a label that we got to go fix everything. Some people twirl their hair when they're nervous. I've seen so many things, IEP goals and other goals, where we got to stop them doing that. We got to stop them biting their fingernails. They tap their foot and it distracts. And I'm like, okay, have you been in a boardroom? Have you been at a Starbucks and seen all of the habits that people have sitting there at Starbucks? Someone, come on, really. So I think that part can be kind of unfair. Yes, there is definitely a need sometimes to really get a severe behavior under control, and there are strategies and ways to do it without ABA. But if ABA is the way you go, that's fine. But I think it needs to be a tool in the toolbox, not the only tool. There are a lot of therapies that if work together with ABA or after ABA or before ABA. There are so many therapies. It should not be the only tool in a parent's toolbox. There are so many other good strategies that you can add to it to make progress. So it's
There
a
are
tool.
also a lot of times when you discover the behavior was because of something completely. It could be sensory. I can't. Sherry's had times when there've been people that she's worked with that had behaviors that she discovered it was a sensory issue in a tag on their shirt, or they didn't like the way the toilet seat felt. There was one young man that refused to have bowel movements on the toilet. He would do it in the pool, but he wouldn't do it sitting on the toilet. And they had ABA therapy in, and they don't look for the reasons. They just start trying, and they never could make any progress. And Sherry came in and watched what he did, because the first thing you try to do is get him to sit down to see what, and he wouldn't do it. And so she tried the cushion, the soft cushion, and he did it. Behavior solved, and all it took was switching out the toilet seat. So you got to take the time to look and try to figure out, communicate, give them a chance to communicate to you what's causing the behavior. Don't just start trying to train the behavior out of them.
Yeah, that we've also used another one that had the toilet seat covers, those paper covers, because he would stand to urinate, but sitting to poop he wouldn't. And it turned out the cool air between the water and the toilet seat was too much for his privates. And so we put that paper thing barrier, and he would go. And as soon as he pooped, he got up. But now his family buys them by a caseload and have them delivered, and they don't have to worry about that anymore. Someone was headbanging and they wanted to put a helmet on someone, and it turned out they had a sinus infection. They had a sinus infection. Instead of putting a helmet on, would have protected the head, but it wouldn't have addressed the issue that was causing the head banging. They would have continued to suffer with the sinus infection that could have turned deadly long term if it hadn't been caught. And so I was like, no, this is a new behavior. This is someone that's never done this. Ooh, this is happening for a reason. And it turned out it was a sinus infection. So looking past the behaviors, the why of the behaviors, not just seeing the behaviors, figuring out the why can also really be beneficial. And there are some good ABA people that will do that, but often they only get paid to take the data and do ABC kind of things. So sometimes those things get missed. It's going to be the.
I don't know if Henderson Haven is going to have a legacy. Our
I do.
kids have already decided.
The state
They watch what we
regulations are
go
awful.
through with the state and with APD and DCF and all the state things and the headaches and the struggle. If we could just work with the individuals and help the individuals and run the business, it would be an amazing experience. But they've seen the headache and they both said, "Yeah, I don't want to do this. I don't want to run this business." Not after seeing what you do. So I don't know what's going to happen.
I can tell you.
We can't do it anymore.
Okay, well, here's my answer on that, because I'll look at it a different place, because I'm about people and he's about business.
True.
The Henderson Haven legacy will be the butterfly effect.
There you go.
That what we're doing today in the lives of the families we're working with, they will then take that knowledge and help other families. And those families will go help other families. And those families will go help other families. There'll be people willing to stand up and fight for their kids. And other families will watch them fight for their kids. And they'll say, how'd you get that done? Where did you learn that? And that will be our legacy. 2 weeks ago, I had a mom who is struggling at home. Struggling. We have parents that don't say TGIF. It's TGIM. They are ready for Monday and their kids coming back, because weekends are long. They kind of dread Fridays, honestly. And this mom has been one of them. And a lot of nights with very little sleep, just struggling. And we're really helping her through a lot of resources and things right now. But 2 weeks ago, she had dropped her child off and she's out on the front sidewalk and she's helping another mom. That's the Henderson Haven legacy, that what we do with the families today will continue to make a difference, even if we're gone.
I like that. That's absolutely true. That's the butterfly effect in a nutshell. It's the whole reason the butterflies are our logo, is because of the butterfly effect. I will tell you this: the magic of Henderson Haven is Sherri Henderson. She said a while ago, he runs the business, I run and that's absolutely true. I run the business, she runs the programs. She's the one that says we're going to do everything for everybody, and I'm the one that says, nope, we can't do that. We can only do this much for somebody. She is the one that has, I don't know, the sixth sense, the touch that she's able. We've had families with their kids walk into the lobby, and they're ready to just hold on for dear life because they know their kid's going to be running and touching and grabbing, and they just walk up to Sherri and start talking, and I've seen jaws drop. This is the first time you're meeting this child, and they're already connecting with you. There's just something about her. She's really is the magic that makes people successful.
I like it. It's a challenge, and I believe in people, and that started way before Trey. That started before Henderson Haven. I've always been the fixer in my family. I've always been the one that sees, yes, we can. Let's just figure it out. I'm, I guess, stubborn. Just stubborn. But that's okay.